Climate has an effect on the way we design buildings. And remember that climate is the long-term trends. It's not weather, it's the long-term trends. And it's interesting to think about how climate is arranged along a spectrum of two kinds of things. Temperature, so it might be cold, like in the Arctic. It might be hot, like in the Southwest. So temperature is a factor. And then precipitation. How much does it rain or snow? So it might be dry in the desert, wet in the tropics. And you can take any combination of temperature and moisture and find where you live somewhere along that spectrum. So here we are where it's a lot of precipitation, a moderate temperature. We're going to focus on climate zones in the U.S. because that is where you're likely to be working. Just be aware that there are, of course, these kinds of climate zones all over the world, but we'll focus on the U.S. And in the U.S., there are 4 general kinds of zones. Let's look at the black and white map down here. Might be hot and humid, hot and dry, might be cold, or in the middle it might be temperate, which is where we are. So, what does that have to do with designing buildings? Last time we saw this building, it's an international style, this building that could be any place in the world. And it came from that age when we were designing things with thin glass skins and driven by air conditioning inside. So this could be any place in the world. And the thing about it is it's only comfortable if the power is on and the air conditioning is running. If any of that stops, this is not so comfortable anymore. We're going to design green buildings that can be comfortable even if the power is off. These buildings have different styles depending on where you are, and as we said before, these are the places that tell you where you are. Let's look at these 4 zones in the U.S. First of all, down in the Southwest, it's hot and dry. Think desert, think Arizona. So it's hot and dry, and the temperatures fluctuate quite a bit between day and night. So it's very hot in the daytime, it's cold at night. So what you want to do as a designer is use things like thermal mass, that is adobe or concrete or stone, to store heat energy so you can balance those hot days and cold nights, and you want to block the hot winds that blow through there. You don't want big windows open during the daytime because that won't cool you any. It's hot outside and you don't want hot wind blowing through. So here are these thick walls made of thermal mass, and notice how the windows are small. And the style of cooling that you will use is a thing called night flushing or night ventilation. So you'll be all sealed up during the daytime, and then at night you'll open it up and let the cool air in. It's common to use courtyards in this kind of climate. Courtyards give you some shade. They block those hot, dry winds that blow across. And it's common to have water features in a courtyard. Here's one in Albuquerque. Here's a very famous courtyard. This one happens to be in Spain. It's the Alhambra. I hope you look up pictures of this place sometime. It's just really wonderful. Then in the southeast of the U.S. is a climate that is hot and humid. So it's still hot, but it's not dry, it's humid. There's high moisture in the air. And if you've ever been to Florida, in the winter time, you are aware that even in the winter, it can be hot and muggy. The days and the nights don't differ in temperature very much. They stay about the same 24 hours a day. So we don't want thermal mass storing up energy. We want lightweight walls. We want shade. We want something that's going to get air blowing through. Here's an example of a building in Florida. Here's one in Singapore. Believe it or not, this is a house. And what you notice about these is they don't have those big thick walls. They have thin walls. And they have lots of shade. They have lots of open spaces so that air can blow through. And as we will learn when we talk about cooling later on, in a week or two, these kinds of climates use something called stack ventilation or stack cooling. Up in the northern U.S., it's cold. Summers are not cold, they're kind of mild, but in the winter it's very cold, and you get extremes of freezing and thawing, so there are issues with your foundation. There are cold winds that blow across, so you want to do what you can to provide windbreaks to block those winds, and you want to do everything you can to let sunlight come in. So here's a building up there in Ontario. Windows facing south, thermal mass, stone and concrete to store the heat, things that will block the cold winter winds, and you want to be well insulated and make sure you don't have air leaks and infiltration. The zone we live in, across the middle of the country basically, is the temperate zone. So it's got some of everything. It's got hot summers, it's got cold winters, so we've got a lot of temperature fluctuation. And that means when we design our buildings, we want some of everything. We want to block the cold winter winds. We want to figure out a way we can funnel cooling summer winds through here. We want ways we can let the sun in and ways we can provide shade. So we'll have windows on the south, we'll have big shade structures on the south, we'll figure out where to put vegetation and overhangs that will provide shade in the summer, but will let sunlight in the winter. And next time when we talk about orientation, we'll look at how to figure out sun angles to help us figure all this out. And here are some sources for you that you might want to use.